Okay, so good morning everyone. Welcome back to another presentation about the history and culture of music. My name is Robert McKnight, and today I'm going to be talking about Woodstock, a famous concert that took place in 1969. Like last week, I'm not going to go through so many musical examples, just because there is so much music associated with Woodstock. And unfortunately, some of it is under pretty serious copyright claims, so it's not always that easy to find online. But we'll go through some of the major examples. But first of all, just a brief overview. So what is Woodstock? Most people know that it's a 3-day music festival that took place in 1969 from August 15th to August 18th. Although technically it did go on into the morning of the 19th, so almost 4 days. It took place on Max Yasgur's farm in Bethel, New York, near the actual town of Woodstock, which was where the name came from. It was originally supposed to take place there, but for various reasons, the venue was eventually settled on Max Yasgur's farm. About 32 musical acts played to approximately 400,000 people, possibly a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. No one was really keeping exact tallies of how many people were there. And some of the biggest musical acts in the day. Although, as we'll see as we go forward, there were some conspicuous absences. And today, in retrospect, Woodstock is widely regarded as one of the most iconic, one of the most famous music festivals ever. There's been a couple of attempts to revive Woodstock, but for the most part, Woodstock is sort of seen as this kind of quasi-magical event that happened to take place at this one particular special moment in history. So a little bit more background. The project was conceived, financed, and produced by 4 guys: Michael Lang, Artie Cornfield, Joe Rosenman, and John P. Roberts. They had a history of being entrepreneurs, businessmen, concert promoters, music executives, and so they went into this project with the simple goal of making money. It was their attempt to turn a profit. Music festivals had previously been a profitable venture, so this seemed like a good venue for their expertise. Tickets for the show, and you can see an ad here on the side, a magazine ad to order tickets in advance. They cost $18 or $24 at the gate, which I'll get to talking about. But approximately 100,086 tickets were sold in advance. So the promoters did have a little bit of income, but that's nowhere near the 400,000 people who eventually showed up, or I should say the estimated 400,000 people who eventually showed up for the show. You can see here in the picture on the side just a huge crowd, the absolutely massive amount of people who showed up to attend the Woodstock Festival. And this is actually in advance, so you can see the stage hasn't yet been even entirely finished building, but there's still so many people. And in fact, so many people showed up that the town of Bethel declared a state of emergency. Going back to what I was saying about the tickets, so although some tickets were sold in advance, because the site, the location for the show, was actually only decided upon relatively soon before the concert was set to go on, about 3 days, the organizers finally got confirmation that yes, the festival will be held at this site. They didn't have time to build up ticket booths and barriers and the stage. So they had to make a choice: is it going to be the stage or the ticket booths? And then when so many people just began showing up anyway, they realized there's no point in making ticket booths, no point in making fences. We've just got to build the stage so we can get the performance underway. The organizers originally told town officials that they expected only 50,000 people. Of course, they knew this was a lie based on how many tickets they had sold. They were expecting about 4 times as many people. But what's really crazy is that somewhere between 8 and 10 times as many people showed up. And of course, there weren't the necessary services to accommodate all these people, like food, housing, sanitation, were all major issues with the Woodstock project, which was why the town of Bethel had to declare a state of emergency. But let's talk about the music itself. So you can see in the pictures on the sides, there's many different performance artists, many different people from all kinds of different genres all across the country, many different creeds, ideologies, all coming together in a celebration of peace, love, and music. Like I mentioned, they included some of the best-known artists of the day, which we'll take a look at the schedule and we'll listen to some of the music performances, but then also some conspicuous absences. So people who were very big at the time, for whatever reason, one reason or another, they actually opted to not play Woodstock. So, for example, some bands like The Byrds, The Doors, Bob Dylan, Guess Who, Led Zeppelin, Joni Mitchell, Iron Butterfly, Rolling Stones, Moody Blues, Simon and Garfunkel, Frank Zappa, all big, big names, but for one reason or another decided they didn't want to play. Some people like Bob Dylan and Frank Zappa just weren't into the whole hippie ideology. They didn't want to be associated with that type of act or that type of project. Led Zeppelin's manager didn't think it was anything special. He just thought it was sort of another music festival. And Joni Mitchell actually sacrificed attending the festival to appear on TV, which she said she later regretted. Iron Butterfly, the famous story with them is that they were trapped at the airport. They couldn't make it. They were scheduled to play. And then just some other groups maybe didn't think it was as important in retrospect as now we know. Some performances were interrupted by thunderstorms. So you'll see when we look at the schedule, it's not exactly a solid block of music. There are some performances that are a little bit shorter, some that are a little bit longer, and sometimes there's huge gaps between when there's an artist on the stage or not. The schedule was pretty relaxed, on one part on account of the rain, on the other part just on account of the hippie ideology and approach, sort of laissez-faire approach. One notable performance over the course of the 3 days was the Grateful Dead, playing a 50-minute version of Turn On Your Love Light. I mean, of course, the Grateful Dead were really well known for improvisation and playing long, extended sets, but a 50-minute version of one of their songs, it was pretty cool to perform in the festival. So here's the schedule of the first day, Friday through Saturday into the morning. It starts off with Richie Havens, who we'll take a listen to. He played a song, Freedom, which he made up on the spot. That's often seen as sort of one of the iconic performances of Woodstock. It sort of embodies a lot of what the hippie culture, hippie ideology considered to be important. As well, since it's improvised, it's sort of considered to be an expression of the zeitgeist, of the spirit of the moment. If we look at the rest of the performers on this first day, there's not a lot of really big names. Maybe these people were successful back in the day, but here we are, about 50 years later, and aside from Ravi Shankar, Arlo Guthrie, Joan Baez, maybe Sweetwater, some of these names have unfortunately, I think, been relegated to obscurity. But before we go on forward through the schedule, let's take a listen to Richie Havens' Freedom. So the video might be a little bit slow or jerky. Please bear with me. The important thing is, of course, that we're listening to the audio. Right, so great performance. And yeah, just like I said before, I mean, that was totally improvised on the spot. It's not a song that he had composed beforehand. Allegedly, Richie Havens was reading some poetry, like gospel verses, beforehand, and that's what inspired his lyrics. And similarly, the other musicians on stage improvised along with him and joined along. Alright, so moving on to day 2, the Saturday, which played into Sunday. We can see there are some more well-known names here, some bigger names, some names that we still remember in the present day. For example, Country Joe McDonald still gets some airplay depending which part of North America you're in, but Santana is still, of course, a big name. Mountain, they're maybe a little bit obscure on classic rock radio. The Grateful Dead, which I mentioned before, with their 50-minute version of Turn On Your Love Light, of course, they're still a big band. Creedence Clearwater Revival, the first group to sign on with Woodstock, and it was their membership or their agreement that became the catalyst to attract other big name groups. But then Janis Joplin, Sly and the Family Stone, The Who, Jefferson Airplane, these are all big name classic rock bands, which is sort of typical of music festivals. Usually put the smaller acts at the beginning, then gradually the larger and larger acts towards the end. Something that's interesting about Santana's performance is that this was their North American breakthrough performance. They'd already been attracting some success in California, playing their brand of sort of Latin infused rock, but they hadn't yet broken wide out across the entire country. So we'll take a listen to one of their performances, Evil Ways. And the reason why I chose Santana over many of the other groups who performed today is just because of the sheer energy of their performance. In many people's minds who went to Woodstock, who remember performances from Woodstock, Santana really stands out as being one of the top performers of the entire festival. Okay, great song, great performance. There's a famous interview where Santana does, where he's just Carlos Santana himself, the guitarist, not the band, but he's talking about, he's reminiscing his performance at Woodstock. And he mentions, one of the reasons why he looked so strange on stage is the fact that he took LSD before performing at Woodstock. And he says, what was I thinking at the time? This was our big breakthrough performance in North America. It was a show that was going to make us or break us for 500,000 people. And then to go on stage under the influence of LSD, intoxicated, he goes crazy. But luckily the performance happened to work out all right. They gave one of the best memorable performances, I think, of their early career, certainly. And, I almost forgot to mention, too, Santana said that, I don't think it was in Evil Ways, I think it was in Soul Sacrifice, but you can see him there's one moment where he looks absolutely freaked out at his guitar, and he says it's because what he saw, or what he imagined, what he hallucinated, was the neck of the guitar turning into a snake while he was playing it, and over the course of his guitar solo, he was trying to tame the snake. But yeah, the performance happened to work out. I think one of the reasons why Santana the band was able to do such a good job at Woodstock was partly the atmosphere. So many people were receptive to this sort of pharmacological influence. But then also Santana the band, they approached their set just like it was any other show. For them, they didn't feel nervous. There was no pressure that there was 500,000 people on stage. It was basically just go up, do your normal show, and then go off. And you can see in the schedule their set didn't last that long. It was only 45 minutes, so their entire set was actually less than that one Grateful Dead song. And you can see the Grateful Dead, they played for much longer later on. All right, moving on to the last day, on Sunday, going into Monday. So we see here another, or more big names, more names that I think people would still be familiar with today. Joe Cocker, for example, Country Joe, who we saw yesterday as well. 10 years after the band, Johnny Winter, Blood, Sweat and Tears, Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, Paul Butterfield Blues Band, Sha Na Na, Jimi Hendrix, all big names. All of these groups are still remembered. Pretty much near the forefront, I would say, of classic rock repertoire and on classic rock radio. We're going to listen to this first song here, by Joe Cocker. He's going to play With a Little Help from My Friends, famously covering the Beatles song. And as well in his performance, you'll see Joe Cocker's on-stage persona, and his way of interpreting the music with his body. I did really want to play some Jimi Hendrix as well, but unfortunately the Hendrix estate has made it so difficult to find his music on YouTube that I couldn't find a good video performance of Jimi Hendrix performing anything other than the Star Spangled Banner. I really wanted to play something like Fire or Purple Haze to really show off his Gypsy Sun and Rainbows band, but that's something I guess you can look up on your own. Let's take a listen to Joe Cocker. His cover, it's a little bit longer than the original. He plays for about 8 minutes. But it's probably one of the most famous covers ever. Not just of the Beatles, not just of With a Little Help from My Friends, but of all the covers that have been done of pop music songs. This one is probably near the forefront of when people think of big name covers. Really nice cover. A lot of people make fun of Joe Cocker's performance, the way that he moves on stage, these sort of short, quick, jerky motions. A lot of people think his Woodstock performance is really inspired by drugs, but that's not necessarily the case. I mean, you can see him drinking a beer at the beginning, but that's his onstage persona all the time. Even performing sober, he still does those same jerky dance motions. It's just his way of bodily interpreting the music. There's a hilarious SNL sketch where I think it's John Belushi. Yeah, I'm pretty sure John makes fun of Joe Cocker and his Woodstock performance. Again, a little bit difficult to find on the internet due to copyright claims, but sometimes, yeah, you can find lo-fi versions of it. And in my opinion, I think Joe Cocker is one of the great interpreters of pop music of this time. Like he was a contemporary interpreter. He did a lot of cover versions, and he had a really good band there. That song didn't feel like almost 8 minutes to me compared to the Beatles' 3-minute version. All right, but going on. So the reaction to Woodstock. I mean, the people who were there, the fans enjoyed it, but the initial press of the festival was quite negative. The New York Times wrote that the dreams of marijuana and rock music that drew 300,000 fans and hippies to the Catskills had little more sanity than the impulses that drive the lemmings to march to their deaths in the sea. They ended in a nightmare of mud and stagnation. What kind of culture is it that can produce so colossal a mess? And indeed, the performance itself was chaotic. I mean, like we previously mentioned, the organizers didn't have time to build fences or even ticket booths, so people just started showing up. And I mean, after the first day, when word got out that there was this huge free performance going on in New York, more and more people just started attending and descending on the festival. However, coverage in the newspapers did become more positive towards the end. So local papers started noticing the cooperation, the generosity, and the good nature of the festival's attendees. And really, they noticed that the biggest problems that were occurring were things like traffic jams and other minor law-breaking things like that. Recreational drugs, I mean, were of course quite common at Woodstock. The dreams of marijuana and rock music. Supposedly, marijuana cost $5 an ounce at Woodstock, which even in 1969 prices, it was pretty low. So was Woodstock successful? Well, initially, probably the answer was leaning more towards no. Woodstock nearly bankrupted the financiers, so the four original men who had the idea and put up the money to do the festival. The concert grounds were left in ruins. So after all the people left, it's not like they cleaned up after themselves. So there was a lot of litter and trash left behind. But then two, just the fact that so many people were on the grounds and there had been rain the weekend. All the grass had been torn up. It was basically just a huge field of mud. Max Yasgur was not impressed. He refused to rent out his farm again next year. And in fact, I think he actually died not long after, either in 1970 or 1971. The town of Bethel, New York, was not really that impressed with the festival either. They didn't re-elect any of the town council members that advocated for the festival to come there. But on the other hand, for the people who attended, they would probably argue initially that it was a success. I mean, Woodstock represents a culmination of the 1960s counterculture movement, and it stood for many of the values that these people who were involved in the counterculture movement espoused. Things like peace, love, freedom, harmony. These were all things that were on display at Woodstock. It brought exposure to many artists. So I did mention that Santana, for example, was his big breakthrough in North America for playing on Woodstock. But as well, many other artists who hadn't been exposed to people in this part of the country. It was a really good way for them to get their name out there and get people interested in their music. Not only that, two babies were born at Woodstock. They are called sometimes star children or flower children. I don't think they've ever been publicly identified who they are. But yeah, that's the legend anyway. The legacy of Woodstock. I mean, so today we do still remember Woodstock, absolutely. And Woodstock has been immortalized in a number of ways. There was a film produced about it, which was made by the original concert promoters, as well as an album. There were actually 2 albums overall, Woodstock 1 and Woodstock 2, which was a way for people to relive the music and relive the experience. You can see the various DVD covers at the top. The movie has been reissued a number of times. Not only as like a commercial feature, but as well the individual performances of various artists have been re-released as concert footage. Today, both the town of Bethel and Woodstock, New York, honor the festival, and you can see a plaque at the bottom there honoring the site, the original site of where Woodstock took place. Some people still make pilgrimages to the original site. Some of them might have been attendees who were there back in the day, although many of those people nowadays are getting older and older and older. Some people who go there are people who never attended the festival at all, just have huge respect and interest in the history associated with the event. There was an attempted revival in 1999. There was Woodstock 99. Unfortunately, the show wasn't as well received as Woodstock 1969. Many people see Woodstock 99 as a very corporatized event and moved away from the original values of the 1969 festival. The definitive release that totally captures absolutely everything is the out-of-print 50th Anniversary Archive. It includes nearly the entirety of the festival, all 36 hours of music spread out across 38 CDs. The only thing that's missing is, I believe, Shauna Na's performance, which was never at all captured on tape. And there are 2 songs missing from Jimi Hendrix's performance, which the estate of Jimi Hendrix has felt was not up to par. They didn't want to release them. But I think those 2 songs are available on other media, like, for example, Jimi Hendrix's Woodstock concert DVD. I think you can find his uncut performance there. And you know, one thing I really like about this out-of-print 50th Anniversary Archive edition is that it was limited to 1,969 copies. There's one other song I'd like to play by Joni Mitchell. It's a reflection on Woodstock. And so, like I mentioned before, she wasn't at the festival itself, but she was pretty close to it. She was involved with Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, who were playing together at the time.
This next song.
And the day before Woodstock, she was playing with them, and they had to depart because CSNY was going to Woodstock, and then she was going to the Dick Cavett show to promote her music and appear on TV. But she wrote this song afterwards, Woodstock, about the experience. What a beautiful song, what a great performance. I really love how she so poignantly describes the festival in the verses, and then really elevates the goal of the festival to something a bit more spiritual. In the chorus, we are stardust, we are golden, and we gotta get ourselves back to the garden. Yeah, well, what a nice idea. So that's the end. Thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in and for watching. Much appreciated. Small bit of advertising for me, myself, here now. If you enjoyed these slides, if you want to present them yourself, you can find my store at teacherspayteachers.com, where I have many other lecture slides on a variety of music topics, and I keep adding more regularly. If you're interested in having me doing any proofreading, editing, any English writing work, you can find me at Fiverr under Dr. Robert. If you're interested in reading some of my writing, you can read my blog at WordPress, where you can find my master's thesis through Google Scholar. And I have links below to my YouTube channel and my Twitter feed, where I post music, as well as where I post my lectures afterwards. So that's it. Thanks again. I'm going to end the stream there. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone.